Hello and welcome to Selling Sheet Music, a podcast for composers, arrangers, and songwriters to learn more about publishing and marketing their sheet music. I'm your host, Garrett Breeze. Thanks for listening. This podcast is brought to you by HolidayChoirMusic.com. Give your choir the gift of new music this holiday season by commissioning a new work or choosing from our exciting collection of music for Christmas, Easter, Hanukkah, and other holidays. Use the code PODCAST at checkout to get 50% off your first order. My guest today is Oriol Lopez Calle, the founder and CEO of My Sheet Music Transcriptions. He tells the story about how he turned his side job transcribing music into a remarkable company that has since delivered more than 30,000 transcriptions to clients. This conversation is full of important lessons for anyone starting a business, transcribing music, or using notation software. Oriol, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. And tell our listeners where you live.
Oh, I'm in Terrassa. It's actually a city near Barcelona in Catalonia, Spain.
Well, I think you're our first guest from Spain on the podcast, so add that to your list of accomplishments.
Okay, achievement unlocked for sure.
Well, I wanted to talk to you because most of the listeners to this podcast are either self-publishers or composers who publish with, the traditional print companies. And transcribing is a major part of that process for everyone at some point. It's something we all do. Probably everyone listening to us right now has some experience transcribing, but it's not something we really talk about that much. So I'm excited to dig into the topic a little more with you. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, could you just start by giving us your background as a musician and how you came to form your company?
Sure. Okay, so right now I'm 30 years old, right? So I began studying music when I was 6. I am a classically trained pianist. And by the age of 16, I decided to go to the dark side and study jazz a little bit. Ooh. And I was more into, events, weddings, and playing in a big band, playing with a jazz ensemble. And by then I became some sort of a jazz pianist. So I studied jazz, of course. And this was all my formation. My musical background is about that. I studied, of course, composition. I was an arranger, but I never did the whole professional degree or the bachelor. I don't know how you guys call that in America, right? But the thing is that I studied aerospace engineering, actually. So I'm an engineer. I'm not a 100% professional musician, and that I don't know. I don't know what happened.
Well, you are now.
I mean, you know what I mean? I don't have a master's. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an incredible performer, but I just happen to be, a transcriber and an arranger and a sheet music nerd for some reason. So here we are. That's my background. And I play in local jazz venues all the time, but I'm not even in the Barcelona scene or not even the Spain scene at all. So just a very, jazz pianist. That would be the thing.
Let me interrupt you with a question before you go on. When you get your degree in aerospace engineering, do they also teach you business skills? Because I know a lot of musicians complain that they never learn about the business side of things. Do you get that from other degrees, or is that a problem that everybody faces?
So we had, the first year we had the business subject, and I was kind of good at it, but it's not like they teach you business skills or business development necessarily. But I do think that having studied engineering has helped me greatly at achieving what we've achieved so far, because you get to know, well, not you don't get to know, but you get to sense and improvise and have the skills to run a company. You have the spreadsheets, the taxes, numbers, organization skills needed. So I think that engineering helped a lot in that regard, but I didn't necessarily have a business training per se. So yeah, yes and no would be the answer, right?
Well, and I was just asking because there's a difference between the business skills needed to be an individual musician, a freelancer. It's a much different set of skills to own a company and have employees and do all of that stuff that you're doing. So you've kind of taken two big leaps. And not only are you jumping into music, but also into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I didn't ask to be here. Would be my response to that. Like,
well, tell us how you got here. Then I'll stop distracting you. You can finish your story.
I mean, I love it because it's like, oh, you're running a company. I was like, I'm a transcriber. I started transcribing 12 years ago when I was 18 at my parents' house after finishing my aerodynamics subject. I had some beers with friends, and at night I had to transcribe, right? I had to do my stuff. I was being requested some random sheet music by people that were watching my YouTube channel, and I was studying engineering while transcribing. And eventually the transcribing thing got on and got out of hand, and it grew. And I had to hire people, and this company was formed with this. But it's not like I wanted to start a company, or I had this vision or entrepreneurship vision to let's set up a company that transcribes music. So it started organically, and all I wanted to be was a musician and study engineer, because your parents tell you to, hey, study something that is just to have a future. You know what I'm
the
talking
backup.
about? Yeah, the backup thing, and eventually the backup thing became the main thing. So yeah. I don't know. I was a musician when I was 18 while studying engineering, and I was doing gigs. I had a YouTube channel with some performances, some piano covers. I like jazz, so I have some very cringy piano covers. I say cringy because I totally hate them now, 12 years after, right? But
well, that's how it goes.
yeah. And people were requesting sheet music from it, and I was like, yeah, why not? Let's transcribe that for you. And eventually songwriters and composers reached out, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And I went on transcribing for years until I had too much volume, and I asked for some friends' help, and I had a talented pianist that wanted to help, then somebody to help me answer emails, and I don't know. It grew more and more and more organically, bootstrapping all the way up until here. And now we are allegedly one of the largest transcribing services in the world. We have about 45 employees working full-time on transcribing, organizing digital marketing, project managing, working on B2B projects, business developing. So it's been quite a ride, I would say. So
I mean, that's wild. That's wild. Yeah. In the beginning, how were you finding your clients? Did you have a website at that point, or was it just word of mouth?
I did not find them. They did find my YouTube channel. They liked the performance.
So it was just through YouTube?
Yeah. And
that's amazing.
They would send me an email to literally oriol.lopez@gmail.com or something along those lines, and I would reply, work on the transcription for literally $20. Those prices have changed since. I'm sorry. And
good for you.
I mean, I just wanted to, I don't know. It was a teenage kind of business. It's the teenage dream, right? So I don't know. And then since I eventually put together a website, that's true. I mean, I had the I don't know. I wanted to put together a website to organize things and have a contact form, some information beforehand, because you always get asked the same questions. And then we went on and improved the website, the customer service attention, everything. Yeah, we put together the structure, right?
I think something a lot of musicians struggle with is knowing when to ask for help, right? When to bring in other people to collaborate on projects. Can you talk about that thought process, and when did you know, okay, it's time to bring in other people and it's going to be worth it for them and for me to jump on this together?
When I realized that I can't be good at everything, and that I do really need help with some very complex jazz transcriptions when I get requested orchestral stuff that I'm not confident enough to do. Basically, when you have too much volume, you need to outsource, you need to delegate. I've prioritized a lot having a good personal life. I mean, I like doing sports. I like playing. I like performing my instrument. I like playing the piano, and I don't want to be, 14 hours per day in front of the screen transcribing. Plus, transcribing is a very time-intensive and dedicated task. I mean, you cannot transcribe for more than 4 or 5 hours at all, right? So there's a point where you have to just ask for help. And if you can, I thought, why not ask for even more talented people to help me? Like gather all the best musicians, the best people around. And right now I have the confidence to say that everybody in the company is a better transcriber than I am. And everybody who does a task or carries out a job at my sheet music transcriptions is better at it than what I would be at. So that's my primarily focus is to hire or to be surrounded by people who is even better and brings a lot of value. That's the way I see it. And I've always been like this since the beginning, I think.
Well, I think especially for the younger composers listening, that's a really important lesson to learn. If somebody asks you to do a job and you're not comfortable with it, you say yes, and then you go find someone who can help you. That way you can still build those connections. You can learn how to do it rather than just saying no and losing that business.
Oh yeah, and learning along the process is key. If you work with people who know more, you will eventually learn how to do it, and you may be able to do it at some point. But yeah, learning along the process is a good lesson.
So take us behind the scenes of a typical job. Let's say I call you up and I want a transcription. What's everything that happens on your end?
Oh, wow. So we receive an email from you, probably a contact form, and it's going to go through our customer service protocol. It's going to be received by one of our customer service support guys. We have 7 people doing this job right now, and we are going to listen to the song. We're going to see what instruments you asked for. We're going to see if we have a specialist available to work on it, and we're going to get back to you with an estimation of the time that it takes to be transcribed, hence the price, and then the estimated turnaround time. Also the formats, if you want Finale, Sibelius, MuseScore, whatever. We can talk about that later, I'm sure. That's going to be, assessed by the team. And then once we agree on the conditions, we can, of course, talk about it. If you're a composer, let's see how the template is going to look. Is it going to be a blank template with your logo, doing a copyright footer for your own works, whatever is needed? We agree on all that, and then it goes to our team of transcribers who work, all of them remotely and locally from Barcelona, most of them. All of them are in Barcelona, some of them in Central Europe, a couple of them in the US. And then it's done by our transcribers. They return it to us. It goes through proof editing. We have some kind of a QC kind of a protocol, a system to assure that quality control is always good. And then it's sent to you. After that, we have a revision process, and we can work together to make the sheet music as beautiful and as satisfactory as you want. So that would be a normal, regular, request that everything goes well, and everyone is happy. And of course, there are a lot of ramifications from that.
I mean, it's a pretty streamlined process, I got to say.
It has to be, because we do 1,500 transcriptions per month. If it's not, dude, I would be nuts by now.
I mean, that's crazy. What are the most common styles of music you're asked to transcribe?
General, a lot of
1,500 is a lot, but
yeah, and we do everything, like educational stuff, public domain, orchestral stuff, rearranged for ensembles, also piano vocal stuff for auditions is very common. Also, songwriters and composers needing vocal lead sheet transcriptions to register songs or just to play them with a band. Horn arrangements for songwriters to rehearse and put together an album or play live. Jazz transcriptions, people love jazz. And if you're a jazz player, you know that you have to transcribe your own solos and get to know those Oscar Peterson licks yourself and not get somebody else to transcribe it for you. But hey, we still receive a lot of,
I'm glad you said that, because
I got to be honest. If you want to learn that solo, you're going to learn what's behind the solo and what's the thought process of the performer if you actually transcribe it yourself. Breaking news, it's super hard, it's super time intensive, and it's going to drive you crazy. But, we do receive a lot of jazz requests as well. And as a jazz lover myself, I love to, assess jazz projects, have jazz sounding around the office every day. It's I don't know, it's a very musical project, and we like that as well. I don't know.
Would you say that most of the people requesting transcriptions are amateur musicians, professional musicians, students? I mean, what's the breakdown in your client base?
I'd say 50-50. 50 amateurs and 50 professionals who have the skills but don't have the time to transcribe or work on that project. We work with publishers, labels. We work with sheet music publishers. We work with music educators who hire us to streamline their processes and help with scaling the content, creating more digital transcriptions, for play-alongs, MIDI, karaoke, whatever. And then also amateur musicians who don't have a clue on how to play that song, and they just request it to you so they can play at home when they return from work with their daughters and sons. I mean, it's a very familiar environment as well. I want to play this with my son. He plays the violin, and I just want to play the piano with him. And then we have an audition or even church service stuff for next weekend. Can you transcribe this hymn, this thingy for us to play at church? I mean, there are multiple situations, like day-to-day situations for amateur musicians we help them with, and also professional musicians getting some help from us, to to work on the creative side of things and be a musician and be a performer, not necessarily a full-time transcriber. We are the transcribers. You do the music.
As an arranger, something that really bugs me is when artists don't have sheet music of their songs available. Drives me crazy. I'm sure you agree with me.
Yeah.
And I've sort of begun a personal quest to convince songwriters that it's worth their time to have their sheet music out there. That's part of the reason I started the podcast, because sheet music in general is not something that people in the music industry, unless you're really involved in that, or unless you're involved in education, that's not really something that's a focus. What would you say to an artist that was on the fence about whether or not to make their sheet music available?
Commercially, I think having sheet music available is a great way to spread the word about your music. That's the way I say it. Actually, we always say that sheet music helps the music live on in a way. So commercially, I would say that fan base, the audience in general, wants to play sheet music at home with violin, with a piano vocal, SATB, whatever. So people wanna be playing your music, and not everybody. I would say 90% of musicians out there won't be able to play your songs by ear. The same way you actually compose by ear, they won't be able to play it by ear. So sheet music is a good, solid start to play the songs and the way to build up stuff on top of it. So that's the way we say sheet music. And in terms of arrangements, it's very good to have the sheet music of the vocal line, of the piano accompaniment, the chords, in order to be able to arrange horns on top of it, strings on top of it, and have your music professionally available to the musicians that surround you, because that's like the base.
Well, I would assume that most of the songs that get requested from you are songs that do not have the sheet music available. So your company in its existence is proof of my point that people want this music. And
yes, exactly.
And just like artists have no problem hiring, a mixer to mix the album, or a producer or an engineer to do the session, hiring somebody to transcribe and engrave the music is just another part of that process, in my mind anyway.
It is to ours as well. And also you mentioned engraving. Also manuscripts have to be digitized in order to generate parts from full scores. So there's a lot of reasons why one would like to have a digital sheet music available for your own projects or for other projects you might be playing on or working on, for sure.
So I have a deep philosophical question for you.
Let's go.
At what point does it stop being a transcription and start being an arrangement?
Whew. Well, that's
or maybe it's a legal question. I don't know, but
no, I don't think it has to do with the legal side of things. It is very, I mean, the subjective thing and the objective thing. That note is wrong. That that time signature, it shouldn't be 6/8. It should be 3/4. The way I hear it. Is it G flat? Is it F sharp? Whoa, those kind of questions, music notation wise and music wise. We have very intense discussions at the office when talking about certain projects. And when we receive feedback from a project, maybe there's a lot of, 30% of our team are actually originally musicologists, by the way. So you can imagine.
Interesting.
Well, so transcription versus arrangement, that's something that we certainly ask the customers before starting a job, because it's we need to know if it has to be a one-to-one thing, or if there can be some creativity involved and have an arrangement going. So yeah, philosophical question without an answer, I'm afraid.
Well, I tend to think anytime you are taking music and doing it in a different format, if it's a piano vocal, but the original was guitar and vocal, even if you're not trying to change the song, in a way, you're making an arrangement.
Yeah, it's an arrangement. We would call that an arrangement. But what if you have a piano vocal, and the piano part is actually coming from a piano reduction from an orchestral part, or
right? Exactly. It's a messy topic sometimes.
Yeah, I cannot hear the bassoon notes or the horns that the orchestra are playing. Okay, my lady, that is because we only have 10 fingers as a pianist, and this is a piano reduction and a piano vocal. Okay. Then this is considered subjective or objective arrangement, or is it a one-on-one transcription? It's very hard. Again, the criteria plays a big role here. So you just have to trust the transcriber's criteria. And if you don't like something, just let us know, and proof editing will take care of it. We have our proof editors who will help with the revision process. Actually, do you know how do we call the people who help you with the reviewing process and actually provide a conversion from Sibelius to Finale? Do you know how do we call them internally?
What?
We call it the wizardry team. They are the wizards, because somehow, in a way, they do the magic to please the customer success team, right? So they take the Sibelius, they put the finishing touches. Nobody knows how, nobody knows why. They have their scripts. We have a lot of automation as well. And the wizarding team, it's 2 people right now. You send a problem to them and it comes out solved. So they just do some Wingardium Leviosa stuff and the problem goes away. So yeah, we have an internal magical department that takes care of all these processes, which is funny.
You're the Ministry of Music.
Indeed.
When you're transcribing, do you have a process that you go through that you find to be helpful? Is it always tempo first, then key, then bass line, then melody? I mean, what's the order that you do everything?
Actually, we would have to ask every transcriber, because everybody has its own ways of working, right? But actually, if I recall correctly, I think we have some blog posts explaining the ways that each transcriber works, because maybe the guitar guys work in a different way than an orchestrator, and compared to the horns guy, it's different. So in general, what I used to do, because I unfortunately don't transcribe anymore, but what I used to do on the hundreds of transcriptions I did, generally it's listening to the piece first, getting the feel of it, tempo, getting the time signature, of course, key signature, and then maybe working on the melody, the main melodies that you hear, if we're talking about a piano arrangement, right? So maybe a bit of the right hand at the beginning. Then if the left hand has a lot of patterns and it's easy to copy paste, you just go on and work on the left hand patterns, and then just go on as you please. You can always loop a section and work intensely on a section. If it's too hard, you can jump to the next one, leave the hard section for another moment. Maybe it repeats after, and then you get more used to it. But in general, every transcriber is going to have a different method, and all of them work if the quality of the sheet music at the end is good. Of course, at the end, slurs, articulations, dynamics, layout is very important. I see very good transcribers outside of my sheet music transcriptions who are very good transcribers at the notes, like rhythms, pitches, but then layout, presentation is definitely not acceptable. And we believe that this plays a very important role as well, because it doesn't only have to be good, it has to look good, right? So that's always a key thing that we try to prioritize. But yeah, and then at the end, maybe take a couple more listens once you finish to make sure you didn't leave anything out, would be my kind of process when transcribing. But of course, hey, whatever works for you, right? What do you transcribe? What would be yours? Can I ask you that?
Sure. I like to start with the bass notes. I like to just have I like to have something there for the whole song, just to have the structure, so I don't get lost visually, and then I go back and I fill in things from there. But I typically start with okay, what's the tempo? What's the time signature? Figure out what key we're in. I sort of set up the document. I'm in Finale, so I set up the Finale document, and I have a couple of templates that I use, so that part is pretty quick. And then for me, a lot of the time, what I'm transcribing is piano music, and so having that lowest note in the left hand there sort of helps to. It's like a guidepost as I'm listening to the rest of it, just to see where I am. I'm a very visual person, and very rhythmic, so I would say the bass notes first, and then almost the rhythms are next most important, I think. It's interesting. I found that I can pick up the rhythm right away, and then I have to go back a couple of times and check some of the notes, especially with faster stuff. It's like I know there's 6/8 notes here, and I got the general shape of it, but I don't have that amazing ear where I could just sort of pick out of thin air, like, oh, G, B, C, F sharp,
Also, chord symbols. If you're into jazz or pop, chord symbols usually help a lot, to have this structure and something in place. Then you transcribe the chord symbol, and then you transcribe the rest of the notes because you already know the harmony. Or the other way around, you transcribe the notes first and then the chords. So,
well, now you're asking me the deep philosophical questions.
Why?
Because there's 100 ways to spell every chord symbol, especially if you're transcribing jazz, and you have to assume what's left out and what's put in. Just, I mean, there's so many different ways to voice a chord. There's not really any way to know for sure, at least once you start thinking about extended harmony.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I mean, if you just transcribe the basic chords, not without the upper structures, you should be good to go most of the times, right? But what then if people are looking for the upper structures and they didn't ask you that? So it's always a hard topic. When to go the extra mile, or when to leave it at something practical and useful. Also, that's also very challenging and tricky when you're transcribing for somebody else, right?
Well, and I find it hard with piano music especially, but maybe even more so with guitar, uh, figuring out what's the overtone and what's the actual note itself.
Oh, really?
But,
Really?
well, if it's a wide chord, sometimes it's like, well, what are those
Oh,
notes? What are
yeah.
those notes in the middle? Sometimes it's not entirely clear.
Yeah, it's happened before. Yeah.
You've got guitar, they're played on 6 strings, and the middle ones sometimes get lost, at least to me. I'm a trombone player by training.
Oh, okay.
And so my ear does, I can pick out the second flute part in an orchestra thing, no problem. And then you hand me a guitar transcription, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because my brain isn't trained to listen for that. It really does take practice and a lot of it. And obviously that's the correct answer. How do you get better at transcribing? You practice. Do you have any other tips or suggestions?
I'd say you can manipulate or play around a bit with the original audio by looping it, making it slower. Having, in general, I think that having a good tool to scroll through the audio up and down, left and right is key, because if you're
are you talking about scrolling through the waveform itself?
Not the waveform, not necessarily, just like the song itself, the music itself. Imagine transcribing from Spotify. It's not like the arrows don't work. You cannot loop a section, right? It doesn't work. So it's better to have the audio, put it on I think there's a software called Transcribe, right? Or on a DAW, on Logic. Just put it on Logic and play around with the audio on Logic, and then it'll be easier. Have everything in one screen or maybe 2 screens, and the setup is going to be very important. Of course, headphones and just patience and practice. There's of course a lot of tips and tricks you can have. Shortcuts would be one as well for the music notation, right? We can talk about that if you want.
Do you prefer transcribing with headphones?
Myself, I do prefer transcribing with headphones, but it can get more intense in a way. Once you've gone through the same passage like 25 times, you're gonna dream about it. I can guarantee that.
What software tools do you use? You mentioned a couple in that last answer, but Transcribe was one that I'm familiar with. Logic's one I'm familiar with. Anything else that our listeners should know about?
Not really, because right now, in the next years, I'm sure there are going to be some other AI-powered solutions that kind of assist the process and try to like pick out the nodes and help with this and that. But so far, what we've experimented with, it's so not reliable yet that it's just so much easier to transcribe from scratch. So anytime a customer sends our way, hey, I used this random software to put together this XML file, can you start a transcription with that stuff I'm sending you? We're like, dude, this is hopeless. I mean, it's way easier that we start from scratch. That's the way we're working now. This doesn't mean that in the next years we're not going to have more tools and more assistance by AI-powered tools, for sure.
That's something I wanted to ask you about. Do you have any sort of inside knowledge on what's coming on the AI front?
There's a lot of things happening. We have chord detection happening in academia. We have audio stem separation by companies like AudioShake, Moises, right? We have, how do you call that? When you slow down a song and and the quality remains intact, right? So we have this kind of... you have a lot of technology going on at the moment, and I think that at some point AI is going to be able to help at transcribing, but music notation wise, like writing precisely and exactly what is going on in a music notation accepted way that is not MIDI powered ish, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's going to be hard because right now the tools are trying to find a way around going from MP3 to MIDI, and then from the MIDI, once we get to the MIDI, you just kind of throw the MIDI at a score without even splitting the hands properly. And then the way it looks, it's the way that sheet music is going to look like. And that's a big no, right? Because it's not going to be playable. It's not going to be musician friendly. So that last step to make it music notation friendly is the step that is missing currently, and I don't know how many years it's going to take, but I assume it's going to eventually happen, right?
Do you see your company evolving then when that happens? I mean, give it 5, 10 years and the robots will be transcribing everything. Will you shift to be more of an engraving house or a notation service, or do you see it going some other way?
For sure, we will certainly adapt to whatever comes, and we will go hand by hand with companies who power this and who incentivize this. But I'm not sure on what will happen exactly. By no means we will be like, oh no, humans are always going to do it better. Screw the AI. No, I mean, we're going to embrace it. We're working together. Actually, we are developing our own automation tools, our own solutions in house. We're putting together some ways to improve our workflow. That's, of course, quite internal. But I don't think that robots are going to be transcribing 100% of the content that we're transcribing right now, because there's a lot of fine-tuning, arranging, simplifying this song for this very customer. Orchestration-wise, it's very far at this moment. So I think that in certain transcriptions, melodic, horns, vocals, lyrics, we're close to that in the next years, and for other stuff, it's I don't see it happening at least in 10, 15 years. But of course, I could be wrong, and time will tell.
Yeah, we'll see how this episode ages.
I know. Maybe in 2 years it's aged so bad, I have to, I'm canceled, right?
Well, if it happens, we'll have you back on.
All right.
You also publish a lot of music. So in a certain way, you're also a publishing company. Tell me more about that side of the business and how important that is to your process. I've seen a lot of your arrangements on Music Notes, for example. I'm sure there are other places as well. So you're not just transcribing, you're also publishing.
Yeah, I mean, since we have a quite relevant music tutorials channel on YouTube, and there we publish some transcriptions that we like for our music community. We also have a Discord, and of course, in the best possible licensed way, we partner with Music Notes, which are great guys and great partners of ours, and we publish our best arrangements, or at least the arrangements that we believe that people are gonna like the most on their website, and it's under our signature artist catalog. And but this is not really the core of the business, though. It's just like a side thing, to monetize content that we think that people are gonna like on our music community. So we put together those arrangements just for the community. But and the core of the business remains to provide tailored custom services to both B2C and B2B customers. And right now, as we speak, we're pivoting more into helping companies in music tech, music education, and in general, labels, publishers. We want to help them scale their content, and not necessarily working on a song-by-song basis, but with large chunks and large batches of music. That is our priority right now. So yeah, publishing is good, but we remain loyal to providing the exact sheet music and service that businesses need, not only on sheet music, but also MIDI files or XML or scrolling sheet music, anything digital, because now everything's going to be digital, right?
Well, since you brought it up, all of your music that you transcribe is digital, right? So do you have thoughts on ways musicians can use digital music effectively, apps or programs, or I don't know, like the shift from paper to digital is something I'm very interested in. And I see a lot of people still sticking with their paper, And I'm sure a lot of them print out the music that you send them. But any thoughts on that, on making that transition successfully?
Yeah, I mean, sheet music in PDF is you print it out, it's there. But sheet music in the digital format, XML, can be transposed. It can be used to play along a backing track. It can be used as scrolling sheet music on certain apps out there. I mean, there are a lot, right? Digital formats in general is where we're going, and where, especially for music education, where the priority is right now. And for musicians and composers, also, if you have the right MIDI files and digital files, eventually you will be able to put it on an AI and generate a new song from there, from your ideas, or shape your song in a way that you wouldn't have imagined, thanks to the fact that you have the digital files ready to inform those systems, right? And you cannot do that with a pencil and a paper. However, when you write, and if you're used to pencil and paper, that's fine. But eventually you are going to have to do the jump and go to the digital format somehow.
Do you see there being a large market for MIDI files or XML files of compositions then? Like if I decided to write a piece for piano, would there be a market for the file itself?
I'm not sure. It's hard to say, because if you sell your XML and your MIDI file, you're actually selling the editable file,
Well,
and
and
everybody
that's the
can.
problem.
The problem or the good thing, I'm not sure. That's a very good question. If you were to sell, I don't know, let's say that you're a visual artist, and instead of selling like a graphic designer or visual artist, and instead of selling the PNG or the image format of your work, what if you sell the actual like Photoshop or Illustrator raw file? Would that be cool? I don't know. I mean, I'm asking because I don't know the question, huh? So
Well,
I'm not really that sure.
well, if you gave me a Photoshop file, I wouldn't know what to do with it. You'd have to have the expertise, but you were just talking about how music XML files are getting used more in education, and I see that as well. But
Mm,
if I sell my music as XML files, you're right. Like once it's out there, anybody can change it and do whatever they want with it. And maybe there's something there. I don't know. Maybe you write a piece that's meant to be altered in a certain way, and that's part of the appeal. But sounds like certainly
mm.
that's not something mainstream yet at this point.
Yeah, the way I see it is that the digital formats are very useful, like internally for as a composer. If you're working alongside an education company or with other composers or arrangers to exchange work, but not necessarily useful to make it available to the public. Your work, so
Mm.
your work can be made available via a recording, a PDF, a book, right? And publishers will likely agree with me, because publishers usually are not sure about, oh, this digital format, how is it going to look, how is it going to be displayed, right? They have so many questions, and that's good. I totally get that. So for the public, as a composer, when trying to monetize your content, I would still stick to the usual formats that we're used to, unless somebody comes up with something unusual, which I would very happily embrace, by the way.
Well, if anyone listening wants to come up with a new XML software, go for it. Let me know. Shoot me a message.
Yeah, I mean,
So I'm sure you and your team live in notation software all day, every day. So what are your thoughts on the current landscape and the options available to composers? You've got Finale, Sibelius, Dorico, MuseScore. Are there others that you use? What do you see going on in that space that you find interesting?
well, good question. I mean, we use pretty much all of them, right? We do have two main teams that use Sibelius and Finale, and actually at the Christmas dinners, it's always one against the other. Like, oh, you cannot do that with Sibelius. You cannot do that with Finale. There's a lot of banter involved. When there's a technical problem with Finale, the Sibelius team goes like, "Ha! You cannot solve that." But in general, all of them are very good softwares, and I would highlight the growth, not necessarily that it's better, but the growth of the team at MuseScore. MuseScore 4 has been a great release. I think it was actually completely redesigned. UX-wise, it's amazing. And right now, I think it's been updated very recently to 4.2, which is a great version as well that improves even the guitar tabs, which was a bit lacking before. So MuseScore 4.2 is great. And of course, open source and free to use. So no licenses involved in that regard. Dorico, I'm not that familiar with. I don't have anybody in the team that uses it. We do have a couple customers that love Dorico, but I would say that it's a more professional software, maybe less for beginners. So for beginners, always go with MuseScore. And if you're at school, if you used Finale, you're going to be probably used to Finale. But if the first notation software that you had is Sibelius, in general, Sibelius users are like the Mac users that are always like, "Man, I cannot run an Android or a Windows," right? So it's every software has its pros and cons, I would say.
Is there one that you think is more useful for transcription specifically?
No, I don't think so. I think all of them are great. Because transcription is just listening to something and notating it immediately, right? So I would say that all four softwares are great for music transcription. Then for me, for playback, if you want to listen what your wrote is sounding, I would say that all of them have very relatively great playback engines. So I don't see a major difference there, because of course it's always going to depend on the library that you got. If you got native instruments, if you got the default library as well. By the way, we're not mentioning Guitar Pro, which is the main guitar music notation software used by the community. Not necessarily the most professional and easy to like tweak and fine tune software, but it's widely used by the guitar community, and maybe not so much for composers and educators, but Guitar Pro is very popular as well.
Yeah, that's a really great summary. I'm curious, do you track what happens to the things that you transcribe after you send them off, or is that just too much work?
Oh, I mean that would be too much work, but we certainly receive a lot of thank you notes and videos of people playing the stuff that we transcribe, composers saying, "Hey, look how my composition sounded this other day that we performed it," or songwriters saying, "Hey, I registered the album. Here's the Spotify link. Can you share it on your social networks?" So there's a lot of stories behind each case, and we like to follow it up. But we don't necessarily have the resources to track what happens to that piece of sheet music that we transcribe. We just make sure that it's not distributed or shared without consent on the internet in general. But again, that's also very hard to track, and publishing companies actually struggle with this a lot already. So we would have the same problem. Yeah.
Well, and the reason I was asking is that you work with so many different people. I wonder if you have seen anything that one of your clients has done that's been really successful at promoting their own music that you could share.
Yeah, we do work with a lot of composers and artists that do covers on YouTube that have used the sheet music that we have transcribed for them to add a new revenue stream to their career, to their to their efforts, and it's gone really nicely. We work with one. I want to highlight one, which is Gavin Luke. Gavin Luke is a pianist and composer, and he has a lot of like piano music. It's rather like chill, simple, easy to perform, digest, easy listening piano music. And eventually, some years ago, we worked with him on dozens of scores for his personal store online, and he's been getting a lot of sales from people who want to play his music. So, and since it's very sheet music friendly, that's the term I like to call it, like sheet music and like musician friendly, because it's like kind of a plug and play. Because if you're a decent sight reader, it's like music that sits well in the fingers and it sounds great. It has a lot of potential. On the other side, we've also worked with people who do covers, like, I don't know, Neil Archer, Lake Ueda, or YouTubers in general who monetize their content and need those transcriptions done. They publish them on Music Notes. Everything's licensed and copyrighted. And they just add another revenue stream again. They distribute pop songs, piano covers at an advanced level or easier level or professional level. Even I think we've even worked with Peter Benz, which is a crazy YouTuber that does like piano loop covers with crazy skills, virtuosic skills, and even that, because people see it and say, "Oh my God, I want to play like this guy."
It's like, yeah, good luck.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, well, you're gonna get this sheet music, and I don't know if you're gonna make it, but still, maybe even for collection purposes, people love to have that sheet music at home. They like to try it out, and it worked great. So yeah, we have a lot of success stories among our customers, artists, composers, and educators in general. Yeah.
Well, before we go, is there any shameless self-promotion you'd like to give us? Anything coming up with the company that you want to share? How do we get in touch with you?
Oh, well, we're getting to that moment. I mean, I feel like I've talked a lot about us already, so I don't know. I don't want to, like push anything. If you guys want to see what we're doing, see our brand new website, by the way, redesigned a couple months ago. It's mysheetmusictranscriptions.com. Make sure to leave us an email and say, "Hi, hey, I listened to the podcast. It was fun," or "music score sucks," or whatever comments you have. Please send them to Garrett and us. And I'm always up for a chat and exchange some emails and exchange some opinions for sure. So that's pretty much it. You guys know what we do, and we're more than happy to help your careers. Also, if you're good transcribers, we are currently, all positions are covered, of course, but if you're good transcribers, efficient, organized, and you respond to emails promptly, please feel free to send us an email as well and offer yourselves as music notators. We might contact you at some point. But again, all positions are covered for now. Please don't insist. because people are quite intense sometimes.
I bet. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. This was really fun.
Thank you so much, Garrett, and a lot of success. And happy 2024, even if this goes out on June.
Same to you.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Selling Sheet Music. If you like the show, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can email Garrett at breezetunes.com to get in touch with me, and you can find my music at garrettbreeze.com. Selling Sheet Music is written, produced, and hosted by me, Garrett Breeze. Post-production for this episode was done by Jacob Mulaski, and our theme music was written by myself and David Dykstra. I'll see you next week. Now go write something.